All right, hopefully that flipped over. So who am I? My name is Grayson Davis. I made a zine myself. It's called That Rug. You play it with one of those childhood rugs that you find, and that is kind of your world map that you play on. I've got it right here. I am a kind of hobbyist game designer. I've obviously made this. I kind of dabble in other things. I have friends who make zines. I'm a copy editor professionally, but I mean, you probably haven't heard of me. And that's kind of the point here, is like, this is not something you need to be a professional role-playing game designer to do. You know, you don't need to have this doesn't need to be your full-time job. You don't need to dedicate 1 million hours to this. So this was published by my friend Eric. He runs a little kind of bespoke publishing arm called Critical Lit Publishing, Crit Lit Pub. So he helped me kind of put this together as well. So why are we here? What's kind of our roadmap here? So what is a zine? You know, I think traditionally we think of the kind of anarchist punk zines, you know, copying things on a Xerox. People argue about this. We're not here to like make a formal definition, but just to kind of keep our context kind of narrow. You know, we're talking about something maybe 8 to 64 pages. Traditionally, it's kind of handmade or bespoke. You're not making it to make a lot of money. It's meant to be distributed physically. Is kind of the one important thing. And it's supposed to be accessible to amateurs and hobbyists and that sort of stuff. So why make a zine? This goes without saying, but I really do want to emphasize it, is you can make a zine for whatever reason you want. You don't need my permission. You don't need anybody's permission. You can do it for literally any reason you want. You can do it because you want to physically distribute an idea. This is, I think, something I want to dwell on a little bit, because an important thing about handmade zines or kind of hand-distributed zines is there is a little bit of a power to physically handing someone something. You know, you can email someone a PDF, they'll never open it, but you can show up to a game night with a couple of copies of something you made yourself and say, hey, I made this, let's play. And then they'll just have something in their hand. You know, kind of in the real world, this is also, you know, for zines that maybe tackle more important things, this is a way to distribute stuff just without worrying about the internet at all. You know, this is just something you could literally hand someone anonymously if you want. You don't need to put your name on it, that sort of thing. I think also important is you can use them to maybe practice a skill or learn a skill. Zines don't have to be a stepping stone. A zine can be your final goal. Like, it's not like a zine is baby's first real book. You know, you don't need to think beyond a zine. But a zine is also a great kind of first project if you're somebody looking to practice a skill or pick something up for the first time. I will say a zine is not something to make if you want to make a lot of money. This is just in my opinion, a bad reason to go into it. Probably won't have a lot of luck. I'll talk a little bit personally about the money that is involved, like if you use maybe a printing service. You know, I obviously published a zine. I'll walk through the kind of money involved in it that, for me, so you can get a sense of just what you might get. But you know, if you have goals beyond a little bit of walking around money, I would say look elsewhere. You know, don't quit your day job. So what are we going to discuss today? We're going to go through the actual literal steps involved in making a zine. We're going to kind of go from start to finish. This will give you kind of context for the whole process. So if you've never done this before, if it seems a little mystifying or intimidating, or you just don't know what the steps are, we'll go through each step pretty much start to finish, and so you'll have some knowledge of terminology and just what to expect. And hopefully, if you're somebody interested in this will help, you know, relieve any tensions or worries you might have. The theme of this all will be, it's pretty easy. You know, these are famously things that people just kind of put together. I'll discuss a few resources, just things that might help you in this process. And then really my presentation is only about half an hour, and then we'll have time for Q&A. This is very, you know, people always say this, I'll emphasize it because it's true, this is a no stupid questions sort of environment. Ask whatever pops into your mind. If you have a question during the presentation, feel free to raise your hand. So we could pretty much get started. And we'll start with where I think a lot of people can get to on their own, what would be kind of called in the publishing world the manuscript phase. This is obviously just word processing. This is typing your game out. This is where a lot of people you probably have something in Google Docs already that you're noodling on. I will mention this is not strictly necessary if you're somebody who's really just interested in laying something out or maybe doing like a more of a visual art project. If you want to make a zine that is just artwork, you can do that. Or if you want to make a zine, if you're just curious how these things physically come together and you want to use dummy text, you can use that. So this isn't strictly necessary, but we're talking about role-playing games. I'm assuming all of you have at least a game in mind that you want to write. So this is maybe more of the literal game design part of it in terms of like writing rules and your game and all that sort of stuff. So we won't dwell here too much. But I will emphasize that in this kind of word processing stage, potentially a lot of stuff happens here. We've got, you could outline it, your first draft. You can do play test. You can do play tests with a Word document. You can get reader feedback. You can do your copy editing and stuff. So you might, depending on the kind of game you're making, you might spend a lot of time here. So get comfortable here. Don't rush your game to the next steps if you don't need to. But obviously we want to make zines. We want to make something physical. So we do want to kind of get comfortable here, but not too comfortable. And then we'll kind of move into the next part. This is where I think a lot of people are going to hit their first roadblock. This would be called the layout stage. We might call this the design stage. You might hear the phrase desktop publishing. That's a kind of old-fashioned term that you might see online, though. But this is quite literally where you are, in a design sense, laying out the pages as you want them to appear in the final product. And this is where, again, it's not too hard to open a Word document, but then you're like, okay, oh shit, how do I go from this to an actual laid out design thing that I can print and staple together? So I think this is going to be where a lot of people hit a roadblock. So I'll approach this in kind of two main ways here, which is, hi there. We can kind of think about this in terms of how simple do you want this versus is there skills or software that you want to learn? So zines traditionally can be extremely simple. You can do you can literally do pencil and paper. You can Xerox at the Kinko's, and you can use software. You can use templates for PowerPoint or Google Docs, that sort of stuff. All this stuff exists out there. So I would say don't overcomplicate something if you really just want to make a small little bespoke handcrafted zine. You can, of course, kind of go more professional level. You can go, if you're interested in like literally learning InDesign or professional layout software, that's the other approach. That's maybe more kind of skill-based. If you have an idea that maybe requires some more elaborate design work, or you want text to appear in a certain way on the page, you might go more towards a more professional level software. Or if you just want, like, hey, I want to learn InDesign, I think a role-playing game zine would be a great project to do that with. This would be, that kind of example. And these aren't value judgments. Simpler isn't worse, more professional isn't better, or vice versa, frankly. This is about kind of picking the path that matches your goals and not adding obstacles in your own path. Because if you want to make a game and you've got some notes or you've got like a Google Doc somewhere, step 1, make a game, step 2, play test, step 3, learn InDesign is like, that's a big step 3, right? So don't throw that in your own way if you don't need to. And again, this is like, there's no value judgment on any of this. If somebody's like, oh, you got to make it an X, Y, or Z, don't listen to them. So as we get into kind of the layout portion, I'm going to introduce a few terms that will be helpful, really in terms of printing. These are going to be things that just are kind of terms of art getting a little bit into professional terms, but these are things that just matter if you're going to print something eventually. So the main kind of thing to know about printing physically is that a piece of paper will be called something like a sheet or a leaf. And the main thing to know about that is physically, if you fold one piece of paper, you get 4 pages. You get the front cover, back cover, and the interior spread. So this means when you're planning out a zine, probably just think about it in 4-page chunks, literally 4, 8, 12. That's gonna be the easiest way to approach it. It's gonna be that sort of page length. So you've got a sheet or a leaf, which is the physical piece of paper, and then you fold that, you get 4 pages. 2 adjacent pages that you're looking at when they're open is a spread, a left and a right spread. So and spreads are helpful because literally, if you're looking at a book, when you open up to a spread, that's going to be a lot of information at once. It can be like a great way to present more dense or wordy parts of your game. The other thing I'll emphasize, and this really kind of comes into printing, is the terms trim, margin, and bleed. This is really the most technical we'll get here, but this is something that can bite you if you don't know it. I've printed things and screwed this up. This is something you'll screw up in professional printing environments. But essentially, on a page, you'll have the margin. That's the word we're probably all familiar with. That's just where usually the text ends, and there's a little bit of white space, and that margin is within the printed page. You'll have the trim or cut line, which is where you intend to cut it. And then you'll have what is called the bleed area. And this is important because printing is a physical process. It's literally blades on physical paper, and there's a little bit of wiggle room there. If you were to, it will never cut literally exactly to the millimeter where you want it to. So the bleed area is if you have any, let's say, imagery or anything that you want to touch the edge of the page, literally you want it to go all the way up to the edge of the page, you're going to extend that a little past the edge of the page into the bleed area. And that's just to give you a little bit of wiggle room. This is frankly not very important if you are purely text-based, if you're just doing something that's keeping everything within the margins of a book. But if you're somebody who wants to do maybe literal full page illustrations, then this is important. Yep. Oh, sure. Yeah, if you want to show it off. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll pass that around if anybody wants. It just looks kind of unattractive. Again, zines can be imperfect. Sometimes that's maybe part of the charm. But I would say in a lot of cases, especially if you're the designer and this is your baby, you're gonna be like, God damn it. So bleed is one of those things that if you're brand new to printing and publishing, you might not know about it. You might be like, what is that term? And it just saves you a little bit of headache. So, and then yes, there's an illustration there. You can see. Just the bleed kind of extends a little bit past the trim line or the cut line. The other thing that might be a little intimidating if you're new to all this are paper sizes. We have kind of the American paper sizes. These kind of are our own, like a lot of things, America has our own little weird bespoke units of measurement. We have letter, legal, etc. The international sizing is going to be this A-based and letter-based numbers. This is a whole thing. In theory, you could really get into the weeds here if you have a certain form factor that you want. You can get into this, be like, I want just this aspect ratio. I want it to be a little higher than it is wider. I'm going to be honest. I think you should just pick the letter size. If you don't know or don't care, pick the folded letter, which is literally 8.5 by 11 printer paper folded in half. I don't know if these are literally that, but this is probably if you imagine a zine in your head, it's going to look something like this on the table. It's a really sturdy, reliable way to print a book. This also means If you're printing with standard 8.5 by 11, you can print it yourself. You can print it at home. You can steal from your office, all those sort of things. So if you don't know or don't care or don't have a great reason to do something different, I would just recommend going folded letter. Okay, so we've kind of learned a few publishing terms. We've learned some printing terms. And now you're like, oh, great, now I have to design this thing. And maybe this is where you start to hit that like sort of writer's block, empty page sort of paralysis. I'll give you, and this is just my personal kind of advice on this point. We'll go through some things that I recommend, but whatever works for you, whatever kind of clears a writer's block in your head is the method to use. But I will reveal in the publishing world something called a flat plan. This is literally like a condensed map of a zine, or really this is for actual magazines. This is using actual magazines, but we can use it for zines as well. It's just a real condensed map of what is going to be in your zine. This is something for you to fill in with like high level, like literally just you're writing like table of contents, cover page, character creation, GM advice, and you're just literally filling this in and maybe seeing where stuff goes, what fits, what doesn't fit. If you started with 16 pages and that's feeling a little tight, maybe you just blow that up to 20. And this allows you to do a lot of kind of planning outline work before actually, printing stuff or maybe wasting prints or wasting ink, all that sort of stuff. Obviously, graphic design is a whole profession and art of it in and of itself. So we could run panels on that as well. I'm not a graphic designer, but I would say this is more an art than a science, and there's a certain degree of intuition that I think any of you can use here. So I mentioned spreads. I think that would be like a place to start thinking about it. What material kind of deserves to live together in a big open spread? If you have like a 2-page character creation section, that would be nice to just open up, have it in front of you, see it all at once. So let like kind of page breaks and spreads kind of guide you in this regard. And yeah, follow your gut. If you look at this and it's like something seems wrong here, I think this section should go here, or these 2 pages should really go together. You can use your intuition to a large degree. But flat plan is a great way to start if you don't know anything.
In your experience, is 32 pages a good number for like an RPG?
Yeah, I'll say like the correct answer is who knows, but I'll say I think for a lot of people 32 would be a good maybe starting place for if you have generally a zine length thing in mind, but you're like, well, I don't know if it's going to be 20 or 60 or something. Yeah, 32. Just start, take a flat plan like this and start filling it in and be like, do I have a bunch of empty pages or am I running out of space? And I think to that question, again, I'll just say like you can Google flat plan templates, and this is a great low effort way to test a question like that, where you're like, I don't know, 32 sounds about right. Let's see what happens if I start filling in pages. Yeah.
32 is also the minimum leaf number for many professional printers. Like if you go up to them and tell them you want anything less than 32, they'll laugh hysterically.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We'll talk a little bit more about actually interacting with printers and print services later. But depending on the printer you might want to use, maybe especially if maybe you know a printer in town that you like, they might have their own requirements.
Yeah, but of course I'm talking about this was my experience back before POD. Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Right.
So those rules aren't as hard and fast
Mm.
anymore.
Thinking honestly more from like a reader's perspective, like it feels like 32 sounds like a good number where like people start to get overwhelmed.
Yeah, and I think for sure. I mean, like I have a book up here where it's a beautiful book. It's maybe a little big by zine standards, but it's called Perils and Princesses. And some people might not even call it a zine. It's like 90. It's almost. I think it's 100 pages. but it's kind of this zine format. And yeah, this is a little chunky, right? Where you show up at a game night and you just throw this in somebody's face. I think it's a beautiful game, but you're probably not playing it in the next 10 minutes. So. If you really are thinking of a zine idea in terms of like something you can hand somebody and play in the next hour or less, yeah, I think page count's a great way to think about that. So that's a good question. So again, there are templates for this. Obviously, you can also just kind of doodle one of these out if you want. So this is my game, That Rug, 20 pages. And this is going to be an example of how you might think about it in that flat plan sense. So this is the literal pages from my zine laid out in a flat plan. And now let's kind of say, let's go back up a little bit, right? We've got a cover, we've got a back cover, we've got blank inside covers, we've got some introductory matter, we've got title and table of contents. And I'll say one thing, and this kind of goes back to page count. One thing you'll notice is that a lot of this stuff like isn't game matter or game material. Like this is 20 pages and we've got a cover, a back cover. We've got title page, table of contents, a longer zine, 32 plus. Maybe you'd even have a separate title and a separate table of contents. You might have table of contents that runs 2 pages. There's a whole interior spread taken up by a map. There's some back matter like who made this game, stuff about us. Pretty quickly, like these do fill up pretty quickly depending on what you put in them, especially if you are making something that you might want to sell, even not necessarily in a very like professional way, but if you just want like your name and contact information in there, that's going to start taking up pages. So I would say, if you're just starting, maybe pick a page count. It's a little bit higher than you think it is, just to give yourself a little breathing room. And you'll probably find that a lot of it fills up pretty quickly. Again, especially there's some, if you have like charts and illustrations, that stuff also takes up a lot of space.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
Kind of highlight something that I've been struggling with.
Yeah.
So I have full art for cover and back cover, right? I want like one big spread,
Mm.
and I also have kind of like that like an inner spread. And I'm struggling to get my layout such that I'm not losing art like in the gutter or when I'm like laying out in front and back cover, that I'm cutting in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you like handle that when you're laying all of this stuff?
That's a great. So the question is sort of if you have art that you want like big full page artwork, especially like interior spreads. There, you mentioned the gutter, right? That's where the literal pages come together and artwork can kind of get lost in there. Part of it is just if you're making the art yourself or having somebody else do it, is just sort of knowing where that art's going to be placed. So if you know, hey, I have an idea for an interior spread, just knowing that, okay, that little middle area might get lost a bit is part of the illustration process. If you've made the art already, that can be tricky, and that's just sort of, do the best you can, I guess. But I think that's a great point, because one reason I like the flat plan approach so much is it lets you sort of map things out maybe before you arrive at production problems and save yourself headaches in that way. Where if you're like, okay, I know I want like this map to be in a middle, like I want this middle spread that opens into a great big map. It's like, all right, maybe I will, if I'm making that myself, I'll just keep that in mind. Or maybe that map isn't great for a spread. Maybe I want it to really like lay out flat in some sense. So, maybe it should go somewhere else in the book. But again, that's why I recommend the flat plan, is to, you never anticipate every problem. You're going to run into something almost certainly, but hopefully you can solve some problems before they become like, finished artwork that you have to deal with. So another piece of advice I will give you, and again, this is a way to kind of overcome the sort of blank page sort of paralysis, is, okay, all right, great. I've got my flat plan, and now I'm looking at like a literal page or spread that I want to put my game content onto. And you're like, oh, great, this is a blank page. What do I do? How I like to look at it, at least, again, this is sort of out in a sort of outline sense, is to think of quarter page sort of chunks. So this is a real spread from my game. You can see we've got some artwork, we've got a big chart, we got text, all that sort of stuff. So how do you go from a blank page to that? And this is how I like to think about it. It's just literally like, okay, I'm going to map this out in quarter page chunks. I've got a full page chart over here. I've got a half page of text oriented horizontally up here. And then I've got an image that's oriented maybe up and down. And then some text over there. Kind of going back to the question about, maybe art problems that you might run into. Another reason I like mapping things out a little more granularly on the page like this is now I know, okay, if I have an image that I want to put in here, I can tell if I'm the artist or I'm talking to an artist, I know, okay, it's only got to fill a quarter page. It's oriented in this taller format. And it's not going to touch the edge of the page. It's not going to go in towards the cut line, right? Versus if that where there's a chart right now, if that was a full page illustration that I really wanted to go end to end on the paper, I can tell the artist, hey, this is a full page spread. It's going to be blown up big. It's going to be these exact dimensions because it's going to be on a 8.5 by 11 or whatever, and it's going to extend to the edge of the page. And they'll know, okay, great. I know the dimensions of this image. I know that it needs to have some extra the art needs to extend a little bit, so there's some bleed area. Great. We've perhaps solved some problems in advance. So this is how, again, this is not science, but this is how I like to sort of go from a blank page to something where you start filling in actual content. So we've written an RPG. We've laid it out. Great. Let's kind of move into the production part of things. Obviously, with this is just arriving at the point where you have a thing you can distribute to people with the internet. This could be a PDF. This could just be exporting your PDF and sending that to people. But we want to make something physical. We want to make a printed zine. So we're going to talk a little bit about printing. And again, I think this is where people get maybe a little nervous or they hesitate a bit because this is where money starts to get involved. This is where, you're literally like, for good or for ill, this is the thing you're getting, and now it's the final form, and you're maybe nervous about screwing it up. So we'll walk through that a little bit and hopefully explain a little bit. So, good news: zines don't cost very much money. And obviously, historically, they can be extremely cheap. You can steal printer paper from work. You can write it. You can write your zine with pencil, and then you can Xerox it. Like, if you want to make 4 copies of a game to give to some friends and play it at game night, this can be essentially $0, right? I think for a lot of us, though, we're like, all right, maybe I want to make 50 or 100 copies of something and distribute it at MAGFest or wherever. So we're not going to go into every possible printing service, but just as an example, I got a quote from Mixam.com, which is a pretty popular sort of print-on-demand printer service. And I put in, all right, 32 pages. It's a good size, I think. A5, mostly black and white, but we'll have some nice kind of glossy color covers. We're going to order 100 copies, which that might be, I think for a lot of people, that's even a pretty big order. And we're going to wind up with a total cost of, I live in New York City, so this was like $180 printing, delivery, taxes, all that sort of stuff. Comes out to like $220, about $2 and change per unit. This is a little less than when I did this same panel last year. All this stuff can vary a little bit, but it's never insane. Zines are never going to be extremely expensive, hopefully. And if they are, we'll find cheap ways to do it. But again, even these print-on-demand services can be quite cheap. Sorry. Yep.
When you say page A5, is that sheet A4? So because I know the A format, you have it as the next higher order number or whatever.
Oh, I mean, it's just literally the page. I just picked a paper size on a drop down for the purposes of this quote. Oh, great question. Yeah, no. All of these, I'm pretty sure all of these paper sizes would refer to the sheet, like the full size piece of paper that gets folded down and then turned into the pages. Yes. But yes. Anyway, Mixem.com. This is just a site you'll probably see if you examine printing services. But also, this just shows you it doesn't cost a whole lot. It's more good news, honestly. Actual physical printing, it's cheap to begin with, and the actual printing process, honestly, not that hard. We mentioned kind of the dinosaur era of printing earlier, and a lot of this is quite a bit easier now. A lot of print-on-demand services, a lot of stuff that you can just do online, and there's forums and all that sort of stuff. So we'll go through some of the steps that you might run into here. So this is obviously a high-level summary, but typically you're going to just either if you're talking to a printer directly or using an online service, you're either going to just send them your files, like your a PDF basically, or you're going to fill out a form and upload something. These print-on-demand services are all going to have like step-by-step, user-friendly sort of stuff. They're going to, on their end, they're going to turn that into like printer-ready files, like the files that are literally sent to a printer to be printed are going to have a lot of sort of printer bric-a-brac on them. They're not going to look exactly like the files that you sent in. They're going to standardize colors and add sort of printers, marks, and all sorts of stuff on them. But the goal is to match what you sent. So at some point, you're going to get what is called a proof in the printing world. In almost all cases, you're going to get what is called a soft or a digital proof. That's going to be literally a digital file, usually a PDF, of what they think they're going to print, what they think your file is going to print like. This is an example, or this is an opportunity to really kind of read this and double check that it looks accurate, that it matches what you sent them, that colors look right, that illustrations look right, all that sort of stuff. And don't hesitate to ask questions here. If you send some files to be printed and they are like, all right, this is what it's going to look like, and it looks like completely jacked up, this is your opportunity to say something. You at this point, especially if you're using like a professional printer or a print-on-demand service, this is where you're not going to hurt their feelings. It's completely normal to say, hey, the colors on this picture look a little off. What's up with that? So definitely use this opportunity to take a close look at it. This is really not where you should be like literally tweaking like the rules of your game. Like if you caught a typo or something, that's kind of just on you. You might decide like, oh, this isn't ready to be printed. Like you might at this point bail, but this is not really the time you should be doing those sort of tweaks. Less common, but something that some printers do offer, and this is something you might want, is a kind of what we call a hard or physical proof, essentially a test printing of your zine. And the steps here are going to be similar. You're going to want to really take a close look at this, make sure every page and spread looks like you want it to, that your artwork looks correct, that some things aren't getting cut off in a weird way, that colors look right, whatever might matter for you and your zine. And I think, as mentioned earlier, the exact level of service is going to vary by printer. A lot of these print-on-demand services are probably not going to mail you a physical proof. That's getting a little bit into more like professional-level printing services. But you can still use the kind of digital proof phase to do some quality control on your end. And you can do all this stuff even if you're at Kinko's doing this by hand. You can still all right, I'm going to make my own. I'm going to basically make my own physical proof. I'm going to take a look at it. I'm going to print one, staple it together, make sure it's all good before I print out 20 more. This is a really good quality control sort of step, even at the really like amateur or hobbyist level of just doing something at Kinko's. So, but ultimately, you're just sending a file to a printer and getting some pages. So it's honestly not that complicated. And then there you go. You have a zine. You have a physical thing in your hand that you can hold and distribute. So you're pretty much done. Except there's this part, fulfillment. This is really getting into like literal sales stuff. So some of you might not care about this. Some of you might want to make something just for yourself or a local game store. But I'll say, again, this also obviously like shipping costs and stuff just vary month by month. But because zines are kind of like small and lightweight, they're made of paper, you can put them in a media mailer. Like usually the shipping expenses are not incredible either. So, if you want to do this, if you're somebody who might want to do a Kickstarter or something, you have to do your own research, but it won't be much.
The post office media mail shipping rate is your friend.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I will say. The media mail shipping rate is always your friend.
That's yeah, and I've that's definitely like yes. When I've shipped zines, it's gonna be that. That's gonna
I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's going to be almost always kind of your base, like, at the very least, that's going to be your base point of comparison. Something has to be better than that to be worth your time. And now we're kind of actually done. I'll walk through a little bit about the money involved for my personal zine, just so to kind of give you all an example of just, all right, you're not going to get rich here, but maybe what at the end of the day, like, am I going to lose money on this? Am I going to make a little money? Like, that sort of thing. So by my standards, we had a Kickstarter, and we actually did manage, there's an indie distributor called the Indie Game Developer Network. So we had a successful Kickstarter, and we sold it to a distributor. That sounds incredible, right? What a dream come true. The Kickstarter had 68 backers, which was, I believe, around $1,800 total. We sold 100 copies to the IGDN, which is just gives you an example of like these are not enormous publishers. We love them. They're behind a lot. Like if you go to a convention like MAGFest, they're behind a lot of those zines that you see. But we're not publishing thousands of these things, right? And really, like in terms of like income, I think I made like $400 before taxes, right? Of what to me was like an incredible success, into like for something we made for fun that we just wanted to share with people. This was like, wow, this is incredible. So this is just to say, if you're like, I wonder if I could pay my rent with this next year. You can't. You could do literally 100 times better than I did and be struggling, right? So this is just kind of in the interest of transparency. I'm like, okay, what would be like a success? What does a success story look like? And the success story for me is I got to make a game with my friends, and some people played it, and that was wonderful. The success story is not how much money you walk away with it. So that's about it in terms of the talk. So what we're going to do now is we have about 20 minutes for Q&A. I'll leave this on screen while we're talking, but just this is basically. Everybody knows about like Microsoft Office and Google Docs and stuff. I think a lot of people are looking for alternatives to that, either for features or sort of, especially like offline use, because a lot of that stuff is getting like subscription based and always online. People might not just like Google and Adobe very much these days. So here are some examples of just sort of resources you can use. I'll touch on some highlights here. LibreOffice is a free alternative to Microsoft Office. If you are interested in something like InDesign, something a little bit more professional, but don't want to give Adobe like $1 million a month, Affinity Publisher is a buy once piece of software that's like pretty full featured. Yep.
It's actually free now.
Oh, it's free now.
It's free, yeah.
Excellent.
You can give them your data or whatever, but it's good and free.
Okay, there you go. Even better. If you want, I mentioned one here. It's called Electric Zine Maker on itch. There's like a lot of bespoke software that you can find now for zines. More and more, there's like public domain image galleries, stuff like that. And then I would say, there's for inspiration. Go look at what other people are doing here. I got one here. One of the booths. There's several booths selling zines. One's called Junk Food Games. they made this like beautiful like accordion style zine. I thought was very cute. It's about being a bird or something. I haven't read it yet, but it was an easy sell because it's a very cute little thing. And these guys are these are very zine zines. So if you want some inspiration, go check them out. And in addition, there's other people over there selling games. And obviously, I mean, if I could soapbox a little bit, just sort of like look outside games, get a library card, get a passport, all those sort of things. You know, I'm not going to say I never buy like What If D&D but different, but like I've seen a lot of What If D&D but different games in my life. So, you know, we can draw inspiration from things besides other tabletop games. And yeah, I think that's it in terms of the presentation. Thank you all for sticking through it. And we've got about 20 minutes if anybody wants, you know, again, absolutely no stupid questions, nothing off limits. We can talk about anything if anybody has any questions. Yep, in the back.
So I was wondering, do you have like a way we can access these slides later?
Unfortunately not. If you would like to, that's a great question. If you would like, I'm on Blue Sky or email. So if you want a copy of it, I'll send it, you know, come up and I'll give you my info. But otherwise, yeah, nowhere online at the moment.
Sorry, I got it late.
No, you're good. You're good. Yep, over here.
Other sources of getting stuff out there other than Indie Games Distribution Network?
So there are other distributors. I'm not an expert on this. Or sorry.
Of course, there's the big boys like Alliance and yeah, but those guys, talking to those guys is like, you know, teeth extraction.
Right, and right to that point, right. It depends a little bit on your goals. Where,
I'm talking about stuff that will take some.
right. I don't have a list off the top of my head of just like maybe smaller scale, easier to approach distributors. I would say mentioned on here, Kickstarter has like a zine month, which it's usually February. I think I put February up here. I believe it will also be February. I'm seeing nods. That can be a way to get maybe some organic views. Obviously, it's coming up quick already if you don't have something ready for it. Itch.io is a storefront, online storefront that is free to use, and you could just throw stuff up there if you want. They're not going to distribute it for you, but if you want like literally a place to put your stuff online that has a nice sort of professional look and is easy to get set up on, that would be an example. And then I would say like literally if chat to people at a convention, be like, who distributes this, or just ask how they got started. I know at a place like MAGFest, like actual like booth space is gonna, you just apply and pay money for it. But otherwise, you know, they love to talk. You know, anybody who has a booth at MAGFest will be happy to talk to you. And I think, you know, again, Junk Food Games, I chatted with them for a little while. They were super friendly. You know, and I'm sure they'll tell you all about it. Yep.
I'm on like the other side of this, where I'm working on starting a bookstore.
Okay.
I will say with all of the indie bookstores that I've met so far, we use Ingram, INGRAM, and they are a distributor that a lot of like open bookstores work with.
Yeah,
And they have
Ingram-
self-publishing.
Ingram usually requires, well, let me rephrase that. My experience from Ingram from the Dark Ages said that if you didn't have an ISBN, they would not talk to you.
Okay, so yeah, that could be its own account.
Yeah, I will say I like, so this version of my game doesn't have an ISBN. It costs like $30 to buy an ISBN. So if you're interested in talking to like actual bookstores that or something that would require that, again, I'm not an expert on this, but it's not an enormous, you know, budgetary concern.
ISBN, if you get ISBNs from a reseller, if they're cheap. If you try to buy ISBN for yourself, it is stupid expensive in the US.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
The problem is if you buy it from a reseller, the ISBN is attached to the reseller's name, not your name.
Okay.
And of course, in the rest of the world,
Sure. I think in terms, yeah, I think in terms of bookstores or maybe local game stores, go in and ask a manager, like, hey, I have a bunch of zines. I'd like, a lot of them will have a little zine rack. They might just give you $50 for a few zines, throw them up. They might not even require an ISBN. So there's a little bit of shoe leather work here you can do as well, of just sort of walking up to a manager or somebody at a convention and be like, hey, how'd you do this? Or, hey, how can I put my zines here? And a lot of times they'll be happy to talk to you.
Can you talk a little bit about going from like the design phase of like going from I have an idea for a game to the like layout?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you go from I have an idea, or maybe you actually have some rules text or something somewhere, and how do I go from that to an actual start to think about going to a layout? One, I think my first thought would be, don't overcomplicate it. If you have something that just the best form for it is a kind of traditional sort of text-based, 2 columns, reading text in order, don't overcomplicate it too much. But I think stuff like mood boards or other books that you like in a similar theme or tone, not even other games necessarily, but like literal, I don't know, comic books or music or just stuff that kind of gets you in the right headspace. You can also, before you even get to like a full, like that flat plan sort of approach, maybe make 1 page with some dummy text, be like, or 1 spread, be like, all right, let me just play around with some colors or whatnot, or artwork that like, oh, do I want hand drawn, like maybe you don't draw at all, and you're like, maybe do I want open source like public domain imagery from 200 years ago? Do I want like realistic photographs? You can play around with maybe 1 sample spread and see what sort of looks good to you. No, it's a great question. Anybody? Yep. Okay. Okay, about Bowdler? Bowker. Okay, so if you have ISBN questions, you can search for Bowker. And yeah, like obviously, I think zines traditionally, right, are very like bespoke and handmade. In the tabletop space, it gets a little fuzzier because a lot of people just professionally sell what they call zines. So if you're somewhere in that middle where you're like, I like the zine format, but I'm leaning a little bit towards like some kind of retail aspirations, there's just some research to be done there. Yeah. Anybody else? Yep.
Yeah.
And then we'll go on the back.
Color spaces.
Yeah.
Because everybody on the internet tells me that CMYK is good, and I don't really get why. Can you like explain what the difference is there, like what color spaces?
Yeah. So I'm not a big expert on this, so I can't speak too much. But I think this is good because if you get into printing, you'll be like, people might ask you about this, and you're like, what the fuck is a color space? So a color space is literally I believe it's just the kinds of the colors that will make up your final printed piece based on ink specifically. So the color space you'll see online a lot is RGB. That's red, green, blue. Every color is some combination of that. Printers will use CMYK, which is cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. And those are the inks that will make up every color. I would guess people say to go CMYK just because that's what a printer will ultimately use. But I will say, one, this matters more depending on how kind of colorful and art forward your project's going to be and how important the fidelity is of those colors. If you're making again, I'm not an expert on this. I'll say if you have an idea in mind where you're like, I need this art to look it's very colorful, it needs to look a very specific way, and it needs to look that way when it's printed, I would just recommend you research this and make sure you kind of know what a color space is. But you can give a printer any file, and they're going to convert it to their necessary color spaces. And this would be an example of why the proof is an important step, because usually it's fine, especially if we're talking about like a zine like this, which is white paper, black ink, right? But we're probably not concerned about that too much. But if you're working with something that maybe has a little bit of color in it, you send your printer something, they're going to convert it internally to their own color spaces. And that's why it might look, that's why if you get a proof, it might look like ever so slightly different than what you sent them. And this is a time for you to say, okay, that's good enough, or you know what, I didn't really, it's really important that this color is accurate. I got to take this back and figure out what to send them so that it'll appear correctly. It's a really good question. I don't have a lot of expertise on it, but I hope that answered a little bit. Yeah.
I'm a brand designer.
Oh, perfect. Would you like to talk? Yeah.
Yeah, so CMYK is specifically for print as a paper. So if you want things to be, your colors to be represented a certain way to be accurate or close to accurate to what is in the light, you would use that for printer. RGB is specifically designed for certain colors digital. So like we have like algorithms to represent like converting CMYK to RGB accurate. You have to actually like convert those colors. So it's important to do that. So if you want accurately like your red, that's the red that you would have like in the file, you need to convert that to CMYK. Common misconception is that like CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. It's actually the K is T. That K can actually be anything, be white instead of black, or another color, because sometimes you're printing on white paper, you can actually be printing on off-white, you can be printing on black. What people normally use for black for key is to pull in that background of the paper, which is why sometimes when you're looking at print paper, people will have all different types of effects in it. When you see a panel, that panel image with their dark color and with their image.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that adds like more context.
No, thank you very much. Yeah. Like I said, not an expert, so having someone who knows what they're talking about a little bit. But yeah, so I think it's a really good question. I guess just to reiterate, for you can send a printer anything, they'll convert it. For simpler design, it should be fine. But yeah, if you are someone who really has like an interest in like this artwork needs to have a certain color fidelity to it, and if you don't know about color profiles, you can research this to make sure everything's good. Anybody else have any questions?
Do you have any specific advice for people who are doing the like one-page bold zine?
So like literally taking like you're taking a big piece of paper and like it's gonna fold down into a small like 8-page.
So I have an example of like this is one of ours that we kind of shittily folded and put together, but like it's a single 11 by 17 piece of paper that we folded into an 8-page book. Have you done those? Do you have experience with those? Do you have any tips on those?
I have not done one myself. I would say if I were going into that just off the cuff, I would say, I guess the question, are you talking about like design wise or like literal logistically, like how do I make sure it folds down correctly? Design wise, yes. So I would say I think as zines get kind of smaller and like very handheld, I would say just keep in mind that like there is a readability component that you're interested in. You don't want people squinting or needing to pull out their readers or whatever to look at it. Artwork's obviously going to shrink down quite a bit, so make sure any artwork sort of, if it still reads correctly at a small scale. But I think they're great. I think I've never made one, but I think they're really cute. They're really easy to hand somebody, and especially for like really simple games where you don't have to explain a ton of rules. It can just be like a nice little thing to hand somebody. They can flip through and be like, oh, okay, I flip a coin and then do this, and great. I love it. So never made one myself, but I think they're great. I love seeing them. Anybody else have anything they want to talk about? One, yep.
Talking about like play testing.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly like I have friends play test, but like I kind of already know what they like. Do you have any like resources or anywhere where like there are people willing to play test games that like they're not familiar with?
Mm-hmm. So the question is, if you're looking for playtesters, maybe outside of friends or people you know already, I would say a lot of gaming conventions will let you apply it as like a GM to run something, and they will have playtest. They'll be open to playtest. So, as an example, I've done this. Me and a friend put together. If anybody has played Dungeon Crawl Classics, we made a little bespoke module for Dungeon Crawl Classics, and then I think we did this at Gen Con a few years ago. Gen Con has like 1 million slots for stuff like this, but all sorts of game conventions do, where we ran it like 3 times over a weekend with complete strangers. Yeah, I mean, if you want playtesters, that was a great opportunity for us. So I would say conventions are great. Obviously, also with conventions, you get the advantage of kind of willing participants. Like, they don't know you, they don't know the module, but they are like tabletop gamers. They're often, they're enthusiastic. And then if you mention it in advance, like, hey, I'm playtesting this, so we're gonna run through it, but at the end, I'd love to ask some questions. I would say if you're dealing with strangers versus friends, especially at the end of like a session where they might be going off to do something else with their life, I would say playtester. I'm stealing an observation from somebody else, but like playtesters are really good at identifying problems, but maybe not diagnosing solutions. So if all your playtesters are like, to use Dungeon Crawl Classics, if all your playtesters are like, that fight was like really long or kind of too crunchy, or like this felt hard, or if there's a kind of common theme, that's great feedback. But when they get into like specific sort of like, oh, I would change, I would adjust this number by X, or I would consider a different resolution sort of mechanic for how you resolve conflicts in your game. Those conversations could be fun. Those are like, I don't mean to be like too snotty, right? Those are like, as somebody who has made a zine, I love talking about stuff like that. But like, I think that's where like random playtester, I mean, they're shooting off the hip, right? So the specific solutions they present might be interesting, but maybe not viable. But the problems they identify are going to be what you take away. And then as the designer, you're like, okay, how do I solve that? But that's what I would recommend, at least. Yeah.
Actually, I have a bit of help with this one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of online Discord and stuff groups that you can reach out to that are all about like playtesting games. Like, this one is a little bit more brutally minded, but it's called Break My Game, and it is
Yeah.
Discord group where like you just send in the game that you're working on, and they try to break it, and they let you know how. And then I have a couple more that are more like New York City specific. But if you look around a little bit on social media, Discord, that kind of stuff, you'll find groups. And then also just giving them to your friends of friends to try out, and just be like, I'm not going to tell you anything about this game. I want you to read the rules. I want you to play it, record it, let me know. There's also a really good different way of getting feedback of what people like, and absolutely echoing the like identifying problems, not solutions.
I would say also, I think friends of friends is great. Someone who just, you can give it with, like, you can just say, hey, here's a game, play it. I personally think if you ever have this opportunity, is like, have someone else run your game and spectate. So like I mentioned, I made a module with a friend for TCC, and like as part of our playtesting, he would run it, and I would observe. I would just be in the Discord, and obviously you don't want to be weird, right? I would tell everybody like, hey, I'm also help make this module. If y'all don't mind, I'm going to kind of sit back and just observe and take notes. But the more you can kind of, to me, that's like a real, true, full playtest, is like, you're not involved at all. Someone else is running it, strangers are playing it, and then if you can record or observe it or something and just take notes on what's working and what's not, I think that's really helpful. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of great TTRPG groups out there. They can be, obviously, like, there are some really intense ones. Like, if you want people to go in and like really tear your game apart and give you like super in-depth, like almost, I've seen some groups where it's like almost philosophical level feedback about game design, right? You can get that out there. So, yeah. We're at time. Any last thoughts, words? I think in the back, I'm happy to, if you want to get contact info, I'll send something to you. Anybody else? But absent any final comments, I think we're done. Thank you all for coming this morning. I know it's a very miserable day, but I hope this was helpful. Please go to the vendors over there. Take a look at what they're selling. I saw at least 3 or 4 people selling their own games, and so yeah. Thank you very much.